Hello everybody, I'm Dan Limbach from PharmaVoice, and I'd like to welcome you to today's event entitled Digital Best Practices for Accelerating Drug Development, brought to you by PharmaVoice and sponsored by our good friends at DocuSign. We have an outstanding crowd today with hundreds of industry executives from around the world. Thank you all for investing the time to attend. We'll certainly do our very best to make it worth your while. We have a very knowledgeable pair of experts with us today to help us understand how digital technologies are accelerating drug development. Based on our attendance, this is obviously a popular topic, and it promises to be an extremely informative session. So let's meet our presenters. We're happy to welcome Ellen Reilly, VP, Life Sciences and Healthcare with DocuSign. And we also have Robert Albert, Collaboration Delivery Lead at AstraZeneca. Welcome, Ellen. You have the floor.
Thanks, Dan. So what we're going to cover today is why digital matters in the pharmaceutical and biotech space. And then we're going to talk about what are some of the best practices out there for adoption and some of the challenges to make digital successful in your organization. Rob is going to talk to you about AstraZeneca's journey, and then we'll open it up for any Q&A that may be out there. So why should we all go digital? So I'm going to make a bold statement that 100% of successful businesses will be digital. And this comes not just from all our vision of what the world will be and the use of mobility and technology, but really data we've collected from our customers, stories, and reputable research. A recent study from Capgemini talked about digitally mature companies in the world, and they enjoyed 13% more revenue, 50% more profitability, and they had a 19% higher valuation in the market. And these are incredible results about the investment in digital technology and providing more value to a company to work with their employees, collaborating with their partners, and adopting the technology. So as we all know, there are key challenges in pharmaceuticals and biotech organizations, and three real key drivers that are going on is reducing the time to get drugs to market, and that's been going on for since the industries have begun. With the changes of laws and shortening of patent coverage, this will become more and more important to be able to get your drugs to market quicker and reduce the cost. The changing patient model around healthcare providers, how you interact with patients, really require the ability to engage differently, the use of mobile devices, the ability to manage that digital engagement with your healthcare providers and your suppliers and your patients, and then really being able to support and manage all the changing industry regulations, whether it's Part 11, Sarbanes-Oxley, Safe Harbor, HIPAA, and the EMA regulations, and all the countries that you expand and want to do business in. And so all these things bring together the challenges and why digital needs to support this. So how do you get to that digital evolution? We've identified 5 real key best practices to allow you to adopt digital technologies and be successful. And a lot of them are simple. I mean, it's huge investment in connectivity of all the different systems you've implemented, whether it's your ERP systems, your clinical trial systems. It's being able to collaborate internally and externally. It's being able to meet that compliance and have strong compliance processes and standards to be able to adopt and implement the digital technology. It's be able to support the visibility of information and also derive the value of the investment. So let's talk about connectivity. Pharmaceutical and biotech organizations have invested more than gross national products of some countries in implementing ERP systems or clinical trial systems. And tools such as Viva and Microsoft Dynamics or clinical repositories such as Documentum and SharePoint. But at some point, the digital process still is not in place. There's still things that are printed, they're signed, they're faxed, they're FedExed, and really there's a need to integrate and look at all those points and provide the integration to really make it all connect and work together. And mobility is the underlying piece of that, whether it's using your cell phone or a device or tablet. So here at DocuSign, we have standard integrations and have worked with these partners that are specific in the pharmaceutical business. We have technologies that support REST and SOAP API integrations, and we can integrate to almost any type of technology out there to keep it fully digital. The next piece is collaboration, and this is about change management. You know, the technology is in place to be able to move and support the digital use of technology, whether it's internally in your business or corporate functions, or working with your investigators or your healthcare providers. And the adoptance of this technology, the use of it, people willing to give up paper and pen and really support the use of a digital technology is absolutely key. And it's really important for you to look at this as a change management project. It's the ability to change people's behavior and support the way they do business differently and transform it. So just some of the cases we've identified in working with our customers, over 180 different use cases in pharma and biotech organizations. And many organizations start in the procurement area where there's a lot of documents and contracts that go back and forth with third-party suppliers. The legal organization, HR, onboarding employees, all the paperwork around the HR process and the offboarding process. Then organizations move into the regulated use cases, whether that's clinical trial or patient enrollment or sampling or interacting with your managed care organizations or your medical affairs organization working with third parties. And we have put together what we call a list, a roadmap, how to get to a fully digital organization. And the goal is really to look at the value that the use case brings to the organization. Is it transforming how someone does their job? Is it taking out cost? Is it making something more compliant? And there's a real whole process to go through on how you move through that digital journey. It may be overwhelming, but we within DocuSign have a roadmap that can help bring you through that journey. We also partner with other organizations that have experience in doing this. The third key part is compliance. And we all know how important the quality organization is, how it's important to meet the regulations, whatever country you're doing business with, especially around the regulated use cases, the adoption of Part 11 to be able to verify and make sure that the security and the reliability of the business transaction, you're doing business with who you think you're doing. And that requires you to be able to have additional authentication features, being able to make sure that you have internal processes on how to use Part 11 compliant digital transactions, and really make sure you've got the documentation and the partners to make sure that you can meet the outside regulations as well as your internal quality expectations. And here's just some of the certificates and compliance capabilities that DocuSign has. And we are used globally in 188 countries and support many different languages. So the fourth key best practice I wanted to highlight was really visibility. And this is the ability to find internal champions such as Rob, who you'll be hearing from at AstraZeneca, get early wins on using the technology, share those wins, learn from those experiences, track the metrics of the value you're bringing to the organization, whether it's simplifying your business or taking out costs, and bring together and collaborate within the organization as well as outside the organization working with your suppliers. How has it changed the way they do business with you? Document case studies, and Rob will share with you some of the interesting things they've done at AstraZeneca to collect the value of using a digital technology such as DocuSign and deploying it across the global organization. And lastly, value. And this is about measuring success and driving people to action, managing that takeout of costs and the time. And here's some of the peaks. Here's a peek at the value metrics that we've collected across our vast life sciences and pharmaceutical and biotech organizations. And over the course of all our customers, we found an 89% reduction in errors, a cost takeout of over $38 per document, and reducing the time it gets things to get approved or the business transaction by 21 days. And as you can see in this, the average turnaround using DocuSign is less than a minute in some transactions, and obviously with more complex business transactions that people have to read and collect data, it takes a little longer. In life sciences, there's also an opportunity to really improve the quality of the data being collected and making sure that all the data is done right first time. So I'm going to stop right now, and we're going to do a poll question. Which best describes the extent your organization is using digital technologies in a daily way? So I'm going to turn this over to Dan, and he's going to walk you through how to fill out the poll.
Yep, it's very simple. This is actually one of my favorite parts of our webinars, and we've got 2 polling questions today. You can choose between 0%, meaning you're fully paper-based, 25, 50, 75%, or 100%, everything is digital. Great response. Now I'm going to share the results. So Ellen, it looks like 75% is the leading horse here, and but still some pretty good input on 25 and 50%, and the outliers are the extremes, the 0 and 100. Is that what you expected to see, or were you surprised by any of these results?
No, I think there's been a huge investment in technology in pharma and biotech organizations around operational business transactions, but at some point they still break down and things become paper-based. So I think there's some business areas that have solved the digital divide and others that there's still an opportunity for to really hit that last leg and bridge that gap.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to put this away, and you may continue your presentation.
Sure. So I am going to turn this over to Rob, who is, as Dan mentioned, the collaboration lead at AstraZeneca, and he's going to really share with you the digital adoption that AstraZeneca has taken using DocuSign globally, and some of the challenges, some of the things they've had to deal with in order to really meet this objective. So Rob?
Thanks, Ellen. So who is succeeding? I'll take some time to talk a little bit about AstraZeneca's digital adoption journey. That will include tools such as DocuSign, as well as some of the other tools that we're looking at. My group is a global group. There's 6 of us. We've split the world. AstraZeneca has about 55,000 employees. And my group is really responsible for talking about tools and technology such as DocuSign and OneDrive and Skype for Business to really make collaboration a lot easier across the 110 countries that we operate in. So who is AstraZeneca? I'm sure most people on the call have heard of us. We're the 7th largest pharmaceutical company in the world. We're an innovation-driven global biopharma. And what we really want to do is we really want to change patients' lives. We're focused on building medicines and delivering medicines in 3 main therapy areas. I came from the infectious disease and vaccine area. We're also active in the neuroscience area. But most of our focus is around oncology, cardio and metabolism, as well as respiratory and inflammation. We are truly a global business. In 2014, we did $26 billion in sales. As I said, we're active in about 110 different countries. We have about 60,000 employees, and we actually invested about $5 billion back into R&D in 2014. So overall, our IT strategy, this is where my group comes into play. There are 5 areas that we're really trying to excel in: customer focus, operational excellence, technical leadership, simplification, and collaboration. So DocuSign fits very squarely into the simplification goal. Sticking with Ellen's theme of 5 deliverables, speed and agility with cloud technologies. So I mentioned some of these already. We're really focused on Workday for HR functions, Viva for speaker and contract management, Box for sharing all of our information easily across teams, the Microsoft suite that we use every day, and then, of course, DocuSign. So what are we using DocuSign for at AstraZeneca at the moment? We're using it for many use cases. The story goes that procurement was using DocuSign, and we had a site visit from our CEO. And one of the guys in procurement said, "Hey, Pascal, why don't you come check out this new technology that we're using to simplify our lives in procurement?" And Pascal was so impressed that he said, "Yes, we'll have this across the whole business." And so where has it gone from there? Well, when it's starting to go into clinical development, it's starting to go into patient safety, R&D, as I said, Viva for event management, sales, marketing, and then of course procurement continues to grow. So we have about 200 plus different types of documents in procurement. In R&D we have things like statements of work, signing off on Viva. For sales we have seminar and lecture agreements. In the Spanish and UK marketing companies we have what's called a Juno form. For speaker agreements we have a Heart sign-off as well, which is a disclosure form. So what does that actually look like? So that's where it started. And as we were setting this up and as we were going along on this journey with DocuSign, we quickly realized that we would need something to be able to handle the explosion of use cases and to really put something in place to support using DocuSign across the business. So one of the things that we did was actually establish what we call a center of excellence. And this is really key in going from left to right on this slide. So when a user comes to us and says, what's this DocuSign thing? And maybe I have a use case, or maybe I don't even know what a use case is. How do they get from being in this crowd on the left here to actually implementing their use case and to really utilizing DocuSign as part of their workflow and really, saving some of those hard and soft dollar savings and digitizing their workflows and most of all, saving time, right? So DocuSign is really, to me, all about saving time. So the CEO representatives include people from legal, compliance, privacy, security, as well as global retention and destruction guys, because that's very important in AstraZeneca, is to make sure that we have the right data in the right place, stored for the right amount of time, right? And so this helps to talk to some of the things that Ellen had introduced, which is, defining value around AstraZeneca, minimizing risks, increasing compliance, clearing adoption roadblocks, and educating users are also part of the Center of Excellence, as well as really this line here, no more paper, that's really the goal, right? And then you can see some of the benefits. And I'll touch on these benefits a little bit more in a few more slides. So what does the Center of Excellence actually do? We gather demand from the users. We review the use cases. We help to come up with a deployment plan. We give appropriate timelines. We give validation guidance. And validation guidance can include Part 11, so regulated use cases versus non-regulated use cases. And I'll talk about the Part 11 validation again in a few more slides. And we also provide help on creating and modifying templates if users need to do that. As I said, the responsibilities of the Center of Excellence include security and compliance. So we make sure that we are recommending users to the correct regulated versus non-regulated platform. We provide the process for best practices as well as user guidance to implement their use cases. And again, the records management policy is very important, which leads into the approved document storage area. So speaking of compliance, we rolled out DocuSign, as I said, we started in the procurement area. And we quickly found that a lot of our users were asking, well, can we use DocuSign with GXP documents? Can we use it in regulated use cases? And we actually had quite a bit of demand around that. So we partnered with an external company to validate the Part 11 module for use at AstraZeneca. And this has actually recently gone live. It's been live for about 2 or 3 weeks. We've identified 5 use cases and are following up with those use cases specifically. And this is really important to make sure that we get this right because this, as you guys know, this is part of the FDA and it's really used for documents which need to comply with the guidelines around eSignatures. And our first use case will actually revolve around risk assessment for a GXP area. And so now I will stop and ask a poll question. So when you're trying to introduce a technology such as DocuSign, it's really a disruptive technology, right? So I know the answer to my biggest roadblock at AstraZeneca to implementing a technology like this. So what's yours? So let's take a moment and answer that.
Okay, so the poll template is up now. You're free to select one of the 5 possible responses, which is either security, compliance, legal, global, or other.
Yeah, this is great. I can see that I can see the results real time, so this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, we definitely have a front runner here. We don't want to give away anything.
Yeah. So I was careful not to say anything. Exactly.
All right, Rob. So compliance is the front runner here by quite a large margin. There's a lot of people that selected other, so that'd be interesting to find out some more out of that. And then pretty much a race for third between security, legal, and global. Any surprises here?
No, that's pretty much exactly my experience at AstraZeneca as well, has been really getting the compliance guys on board. And that was very important with our DocuSign experience, was getting those guys to buy in and really addressing their concerns with document storage, with privacy concerns, with storage of data in the EU versus storage of data in the United States. So it's really, really important to have very frank discussions right at the beginning of the project so that you're not playing catch up. And to be honest, we have been playing catch up at AstraZeneca. So the story I told of the CEO coming around and saying, yes, we're going to have it, meant that DocuSign became a live project before it actually went through the security, compliance, and legal checkboxes, and it went live before everybody had input, which was a bit of a strange project at AstraZeneca. All of this really comes down to visibility, right? So these are some of the quotes that we've had from our users around why DocuSign has been awesome at AstraZeneca. Right, so these quotes come out of not only procurement and sales and marketing and from some of the vice presidents, right? So in GMD legal, right, global medicines development, those guys are using it for power of attorney to sign off on really important decisions. In procurement, like I said, at least 15 different types of documents, it's 15 different use cases essentially with over 200 different document types are being used. Some of the benefits are that 80% of the contracts are signed within 24 hours, 20 minutes of effort, and up to $30, as Ellen said, up to $30 or even more dollars saved per contract, and a huge cycle time reduction in the vendor setup process for procurement. In sales and marketing in Spain and the UK, like I said, they're using it for healthcare provider consent, for speaker contracts, and in Spain especially, we're using DocuSign to speed up engagement when we need agreement and sign-off from Spanish doctors and HCP professionals on what data we are and are not collecting. And that's a really great use case because those guys are just taking iPads out to the field. They're having doctors sign off on the iPad instead of printing something out, having the doctor sign it, and then having to scan it back in and put it back in as the contract of record. I probably should have made a slide for this, but the rate of adoption at AstraZeneca, so in the last quarter of 2014, we had about 300 users. In the first quarter of 2015, we had about 1,200 users, and as of now, we have about 3,000 users at AstraZeneca, and one of my goals is to get adoption rates as high as possible. Obviously, we'll never reach 60,000 users, but it would be great to see users numbering in the 20 or 30,000s, and we have a plan to do that with our Viva contracts. Demand is huge, so recently we set up what we call the DocuSign Day, and from that DocuSign Day we identified about an additional 50 use cases that we didn't know were lurking around, and we're really chasing those up to follow up and really get DocuSign adopted across as much of the business as possible. So as Ellen said, there's obviously a lot of benefits to digitization, right? Increased speed to results, reduced operating costs. You guys can read this. My biggest driver is just irritation, right? So reducing irritation. So for example, my boss loves to tell the story of when he was onboarding his team and we were trying to extend an offer to someone in Shanghai, and this resulted in multiple emails being exchanged, having to print out the contract. Scott signed the contract, scanned it back in, sent it to the person he thought he was supposed to. It ended up being the wrong person, and he forgot to sign, so it had to be sent back to him. Oh, and by the way, he also had to send a paper copy by FedEx, so he had to do this multiple times. And one of the things he says is that he wished that DocuSign was available so that he didn't have to do that, right? So with DocuSign, you can just do everything digitally. Everything's done by email. If there's a mistake, you just remake the contract or remake the envelope and send it out again. And that's really the bottom line here, right, is delighted customers. In our case, our customers are our internal AZ people, but it really is important to have that value, right? So this is actually 85% of transactions at AstraZeneca, not 80%, and this is really, really important. So we see that you have a very good chance of having a fully signed and executed contract within the first day, and we have about a 50-50 shot of having it within 1 hour. So our statistics are pretty close to Ellen's overall life sciences statistics. And we've sent about 30,000 or 35,000 envelopes so far with our agreement with DocuSign. And another thing to think about, right, is, yeah, going digital is great, but what does that actually mean for the environment, right? So everybody's talking about environmental impact and global climate change. Well, I mean, this is really cool, right? So we've protected 600 trees, we've conserved over 500,000 gallons of water, we've really tried to, we're starting to reduce our carbon footprint, and this is just for the 35,000 envelopes we sent this year. Next year, we're looking to expand to maybe 500,000 envelopes, and all of these numbers are going to be tenfold, increased tenfold, which is a really great story, right? It's an awesome story to tell. So at the end of the day, there's many ways of measuring value, right? There's hard and soft dollar savings. There's revenue gains, productivity. Ellen talked about time of market being reduced by 3 weeks. Turnaround time is my biggest goal, as well as customer experience, and process compliance, right? And all of this comes down to reduced printing, scanning, storage, shipping, retrieval. All of that just goes away. You just don't have to deal with that anymore, which is awesome, right? So that's, measuring the baseline versus validating results. How do we do that? And we've hopefully given you some insight on the ways that we're thinking about it at AstraZeneca. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Ellen to wrap up around the best practices for digital adoption.
So thanks, Rob. So, Rob gave you the high-level story. I think he can go on and give you a lot more details if we had more time. But, as you can tell, AZ is on the road to adoption on how they're going to really eliminate paper, how they're going to simplify their business, and how they are going to get those environmental benefits that Rob talked about. What I'd like to do is stop and open it for questions. So I think, Dan, I think we've got some questions coming in.
We do have some questions coming in. Okay, so the first one, Ellen, is can DocuSign be used for patients to consent to participate in trials?
Yeah, we actually have probably a half a dozen customers that have used us for patient consent forms. We also have customers that have used us for trial and registry enrollment. And in fact, a wonderful case study is Cedars-Sinai out of California is using us for tissue donations for their breast cancer trials, and have actually won awards for using DocuSign to really increase the enrollment in their clinical trial and their goals to fight breast cancer. And as we just left the month of October, that's a really exciting one to talk about.
Excellent. And before we get to our other questions, I just wanted to note that throughout the presentation segment of the webinar, we've all seen and heard a lot of great information, and we've really only scratched the surface on this complex topic. So now is your chance. If you have any questions of anything that you've seen or anything that you want to ask either of our presenters, this would be the time to submit them using the questions interface in your control panel. So we'll continue on with the Q&A session, and let's see what else we have here. Oh yeah, we've got a bunch more coming in. Rob, what have been the biggest hurdles in your company's digital adoption? It's a big one.
Yeah, so I mentioned compliance certainly being the biggest one, and then outside of compliance, I would say it's actually user education. So as you can imagine, with 60,000 employees, trying to get everybody onboarded with messages can be somewhat tricky, especially when you're split across 110 different countries. So it's how do we shape the message that DocuSign or Box or SharePoint Online or Skype for Business are going to change your life. So I would say compliance, legal, and just really education are the three biggest ones.
Excellent. Okay, another one while we got you, Rob. How and how much validation is required to comply with Part 11?
That's a really great question. So when we were looking at the Part 11 instance, we realized that we didn't quite have enough expertise in-house to validate the platform. So we went externally and worked with a really great vendor to validate our platform and educate us around what we needed to do. Overall, it took about 6 weeks, and it probably could have happened a lot faster if I had if I had done my job a little bit more effectively, basically, because the vendor was waiting for us to approve and review documents. Things like the IQOQ, as well as the validation plan, as well as the test plan and test validation, they took care of all of that. It was actually relatively easy and, as I said, very quick to implement.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ellen, I'm going to direct this one to you. Who owns the overall DocuSign process? Since it's cross-functional, it seems the Center of Excellence would handle this. Are they part of the IT or the legal organization?
Rob is part of the IT organization, and that Center of Excellence has been set up out of the IT as a service function. We see it in different places in the organization as we work with different clients. A lot of time, if the adoption is in one business area, that business leader owns it. We have customers that it's actually owned by a contracts group. Other organizations, procurement owns it. A lot of them really, it's an evolution, so it may start in one area, and as there's additional adoption, the company reevaluates it as an overall business service?
Yep, and that's exactly how it's happened at AstraZeneca. As I said, it started in procurement, it went out, it moved into speaker contracts and marketing companies, and now it's coming into the IT department, and we actually have a whole service group that we're setting up that I didn't talk about, separate from the Center of Excellence, so that we've set up the service desk and 24/7 basically support to handle any questions that come in or user account requests. Once it reaches sort of a tipping point, you need a more central function to hold it in a company as large as ours.
Excellent. Okay, we got a bunch of other ones here. Rob, what is the easiest area to get started and prove the cost savings regarding ease of use and speed to senior management?
Well, if you want to prove ease of use to senior management, I would go right to their executive assistant or and ask them how many documents they sign and how long they're waiting when their executive is traveling, for example. So if you have a document sat on that executive's desk for 3 or 4 days and you want to have them DocuSign it in 3 or 4 minutes, that's a real clear example. Again, our journey started in procurement. That's often, and Ellen can probably speak to this a little bit better, but to me that seems like the most logical place to start because the forms are typically very easy to use, statements of work, confidentiality agreements, things like that. And you can really just show the value of paper-based versus digital and just track the time and money saved if you're not FedExing something across anymore.
The other area that some organizations have adopted is in the HR area because of the amount of documentation, as well as on the marketing side, the amount of documents that go back and forth between whether it's wholesaler or managed care or GPOs or your hospital networks, or we have a lot of adoption around, and AstraZeneca has used this use case as well, is around speaker forms. So integrating with Viva and your meeting management tools, using technologies such as Draw Loop or other things to really do the whole closed loop around speaker and key opinion leader forms. Also, some organizations that may be under a CI, a corporate integrity agreement, that's another place that we see a lot of traction to start.
Very good. Ellen, how do you deal with multiple e-signatures on a document as far as ensuring that all signatures end up on one document and not multiple PDFs, such as one per signatory?
So our technology supports, it doesn't split up into multiple PDFs. What happens is we can take any source document, whether it's Word, Excel, pictures, PDFs, it flattens that file, brings it in, and you can apply signatures throughout the document. It then encrypts the document, and we also then have an audit trail that shows all, you can look and see every person who opened it, when they signed it, where they were, and that encrypted file is then tracked with the original document. So you can bring that down into your source systems, such as your Documentums or your OpenText or your SharePoint or any of your your master trial systems.
Okay, so Robert, in your implementation, are you using the workflow capabilities or only the signature ones?
We're using the gamut of capabilities. So we're using everything from just attaching a Word document from your desktop all the way through to something called a Power Form, which is where you make DocuSign available on a website, so you don't actually even have to give anybody access to the DocuSign system. You can just say, here's a URL, click on this, fill out whatever information you need to fill out, and then it will get routed appropriately. There are lots and lots of options. So what I say to my customers is that DocuSign is as simple or as complex as you need it to be.
Outstanding. Rob, how how do you get around the regulatory requirements from different countries on their acceptance of e-signatures?
Well, there's no getting around regulations, right? Um, so some countries, yeah, do still require wet ink signature, but a lot of that law is changing, and we have a really great legal counsel with whom I work at least once a week to update things like, you know, our acceptance in the UK versus Sweden versus Germany versus Italy, you know, when new safe harbor rules are implemented. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the latest safe harbor ruling, how that affects not only DocuSign, but Box, and as well as our other storage capabilities. At the end of the day, DocuSign's awesome. It's really great. You can use it in a lot of countries, but if you just can't use it in that country, then you just can go back to the wet ink signature. And you know, the DocuSign also has the capability, we didn't talk about it, but still to allow people to wet ink sign something and still have it back in the system. So there's flexibility there, and what we've been trying to do, for example, in some of the countries in Africa where the law is not really known, is work with the local legal teams there to determine risk and risk assessment. There's some materials from DocuSign that point out, you know, would you rather go to court with some flimsy piece of paper, or would you rather go to court with an ironclad summary PDF that captures IP address, email address, and any authentication method you used to authenticate that signer? So that's really more of a discussion to have with your local legal teams.
Perfect. Ellen, can you use any device, and what is the biggest challenge with bringing your own device approaches?
So you know, DocuSign has native applications as well as web applications. So we support all sorts of technology to enable that business transaction. And we're constantly, you know, looking at our product. We actually work on a mobile. We work on an Apple Watch now, so we're in the middle of working on that product. So we stay connected with the technology providers and make sure our product works on the different forms, and make sure that we're invested in the product. We've invested over $500 million in the product to keep it state-of-the-art and secure and trusted, and the changing technology that is ever going to happen.
It's got to be a constant struggle trying to keep up with all the new devices that are coming up, but it's also got to be very exciting at the same time.
It is, and it's helpful that there's standards, you know, Apple and Android and iOS, so that helps with a lot of the different devices.
Indeed. So Ellen, can you give us any more examples of mobile use cases, since we're talking about devices?
Mobile use cases. Yeah, I mean, any transaction that you're sending to a healthcare provider, being able, whether it's for, you know, approval of medical information, or you know, about a product, or acknowledgement of a recall, or a product insert change, all that stuff can be done and provided out on a mobile device. In the supply chain area, when people are really looking to try to get rid of the paper in the warehouse or in the manufacturing suites, the use of tablet technology as well as mobile technology, managing all the papers that may need to be signed, say for global trade, moving, you know, export and import documents, all that stuff can be digitized, and that transaction can happen on an iPad or a phone.
It's amazing. Okay, Rob, has AstraZeneca used this technology with your partners, external customers, vendors, research sites, or other organizations?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're talking in a lot of anecdotes here, and one of the one of the things about AstraZeneca is that we have a lot of external collaborations, and we've actually lost out on some of those collaborations in the past because we've been too slow for paper signing. So DocuSign is one area where we can improve that collaboration and improve that speed and really improve not only internal customers but external customers engagement with us as well and their satisfaction, right? And it really helps to make us a partner of choice. Anything that we can do to make signing and collaboration happen easier between companies is a great place to be. So we use it with many external customers for statements of work, with confidentiality agreements, again with the speaker agreements, so all of those healthcare providers, those are all external to AstraZeneca. One of the things about DocuSign is that you don't need a DocuSign account to sign a DocuSign envelope. All you need is that person's email address, and then they can sign it. And if you have fears about authentication, there are a couple of ways that you can authenticate that user, such as text messaging, SMS, or a couple of other ways to do it as well. So it just makes everything easier. And as Ellen said, you can really sign. I've signed a few things right from my phone. I was on a plane the other day when I needed some account work done on the DocuSign system because I'm the administrator, and I was sitting on a plane. It would have never gotten signed, until I got back to the office and printed something out. But because I was sitting there and it popped up on my mobile phone and just hit the little button, and it was great. So there's lots of different use cases where mobile is awesome. And working with external partners is made easier by using DocuSign.
Well said. Ellen, how do you deal with signatures as a delivery receipt or confirmation that a document has been read, not just a traditional e-signature for approval?
So we actually, with DocuSign, you have visibility of whether it's been opened. So you can see that the envelope or the business transaction has been opened. There are business transactions with pharma companies and biotech companies that you don't need a signature, but you sure as heck want to make sure somebody read product change or information that's changed about your product. You can use that as a presentment. You can see where they opened it, how many times they opened it, and if it does need a signature, you can see that and maybe use it as an opportunity to follow up and say, is there a problem with this, business transaction we're doing because you haven't signed it yet. You also have the ability to send out, Rob can share with you how they use it at AZ, but reminders about the workflow, where it's stopping, how long, and reminding people to sign things, which is great. You also can terminate things that you can say, this is only valid for 30 days, and if you don't sign it, it will no longer be in place.
Okay. And Ellen, do you offer multi-factor authentication for signatures?
Yes, we do. And we also partner, we recently bought OpenTrust, which is a digital certificate mainly used in France and Europe. We also have a partnership with the Safe Bio organization, if that is a way for digital identity management. We integrate with partners such as ExoStar. So we have a lot of ways to manage the identity. Rob talked about the two-factor authentication for our Part 11 product, but we also have multitudes, the SMS texting and others for making sure that we can meet the level of security and trust that you want based on that business transaction.
Very good. Rob, let's talk about DocuSign Day. How did you initiate your DocuSign Day to spread adoption throughout the company?
So that's a really great question. I'm glad that we got to that. So I'll actually follow on what Ellen was saying about using something called a bulk send. So Ellen had mentioned being able to send out reminders automatically and to be able to keep people aware of things automatically through DocuSign. So one of the things we did was we had these DocuSign days, and then we sent out a survey post those days to the attendees to try to gather their use cases and to follow up with them. And the DocuSign day itself actually came out of our drive to really try to get DocuSign adopted across more of the company. As I said, it came from procurement, and when it was in procurement, it was great because it was really small and was able to be handled in that small group. And over the last year, we spent that year trying to put in place the service model to get our risk impact determination, our privacy impact assessments, all of our compliance and security documentation, get all of our ducks in a row basically, and to set up a support model in Chennai. So once we had all of that in place, which happened pretty recently, we wanted to have really a formal kickoff, right? So it was basically like a roadshow where we said, look, we're going to take our company and split it into 6 different departments, and how best can we target these departments, and what are the stories that we can tell? And so we actually had Ellen come in and talk about some of the things that she was talking about today, and we split it into different groups like finance and R&D, and we talked about specific examples of how those departments could use DocuSign. And we basically ran an information campaign. We plastered our LCD screens for a week beforehand. We reached out to local leaders to show how important it was for all employees to come to that. So we ended up sending about 600 invitations. We had about 250 people attend. And then after that, we've had 2 follow-up sessions since then for people who weren't able to attend. And as I said, we've really reached the tipping point now where it's going to start taking off, and we're really going to be able to realize some of the benefits. And it's going to move into next year. And like I said, I'm looking to really try to push toward 500,000 transactions with DocuSign for next year.
That's very exciting. So we've heard a lot of information about how AstraZeneca has adopted digital technologies. Ellen, let's take one more question since we're getting close to the end of our Q&A session. How are other pharmaceutical companies using DocuSign?
As I said, we've been working with clients, and there's over 160 different use cases. We actually have some companies that are using us for sampling, for patient assistance forms, for patient consent forms, for clinical trial documentation, all the clinical trial procurement, SOWs for working with third-party CROs. We have people using us around SOPs. We have people using us for validation documents, the approval of the IQOQ, PQ documents. It's amazing the use cases that our customers come to us and bring up that we never even thought of.
That's great. So that's all the time we have for Q&A. And once again, I encourage you to contact our presenters. Our experts are truly interested in hearing from you about this topic if you want to go into more detail. And if you still want to submit a question to our speakers, now you can email them to either speaker using the email addresses on your screen, and just put webinar in the subject line so they know that it was from this webinar. Well, we're just about at the end. Ellen, any final thoughts before we close up?
Yeah, I just want to, first of all, thank Rob for sharing the AstraZeneca story. It's a pretty amazing story of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to change the way they do business internally as well as with their partners, and really improve how they simplify and do business. And there's so many great stories from other clients. Please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to share them with you.
Thanks, Ellen. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this event and have taken away some new insights. If any of your colleagues missed this presentation, once again, it will be available as an archive, and that'll be out in about a week, and you'll be notified via email. I'd like to once again thank our friends at DocuSign and AstraZeneca for a great event. I'd also like to encourage you to look for future web seminars by visiting www.pharmavoice.com. We want to thank you again for investing your time in our web event. If you have any questions resulting from today's webcast, please contact us via email at the addresses on the screen and put webinar in the subject line. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. The event is now over.